Carbohydrates, as I promised, carbs will go quick. Carbs are made up of various types of sugars. How many people think sugar is a wonderful thing? Everyone's like, yeah, I love the taste of sugar. One thing that I can tell you right now is you'll probably be a little bit surprised to know that carbohydrate is not in the essential category. Well, what does that mean based on the definition that I told you when I started? If it's non-essential, what does it mean? You don't need to eat any of it. I'll show you why. So different types of sugars, we'll just touch base on what carbs are. We'll break them down real quick. That are based for carbohydrates, monosaccharides, which mono means one. That's a single moleculed sugar. There are disaccharides, which are two. Trisaccharides, and there are polysaccharides. So there are a lot of different types of sugars. The more complex the sugar, the longer it takes to break down and turn into glucose in your system, but all carbohydrates break down and turn into glucose. The only thing that can save a carbohydrate is if it's delivering a lot of other active enzymes and nutrition, such as fruit, for example. An apple, there is carbohydrate in an apple, but it is delivering all kinds of life-giving compounds to you. Therefore, that is not a bad carbohydrate. What is an apple? It is a whole food. So when you get right down to it, in that first lesson of your reference guide, it will delineate going to whole foods pretty much solves a lot of the problems, okay? So glycogen is stored as energy in the cells of most tissues, but most notably in the liver and muscle. Glycogen is turned and converted into glucose by your body. And your body uses protein. If it needs more sugar, it uses and breaks down protein and the amino acids to create more glycogen, which will create more glucose. You can eat fat and protein, and it will create the sugar you need for your brain to operate. That's the one I hear the most. But I have to eat carbohydrates because I have to have my brain functioning. We've been told for so long that if we don't eat carbs, our brain won't work. When adequate levels of sugar in your entire body at one point in time, 9/10 of a teaspoon will get the job done, folks. And your body can make the 9/10 on its own. That's the wonderful thing. Carbs are unessential. But carbs that deliver nutrients are good. So the more whole food the carb, the better the food. Okay? Two types of categories. You got the processed, you got the whole food. You can obviously imagine and see the difference. You'll see the difference when you're in the grocery store. Anything that looks like it did in nature, a sweet potato, a root vegetable, a fruit, these are whole food carbs. They're fine. It's when you start getting into the processed carbs and consuming those a lot, that's what starts causing the problems with sugars. So whole food carbs are in their most natural state. Processed carbs are normally broken down, bleached, and altered in a manner that doesn't make them a whole food anymore. A lot of you may not know this. A lot of altered and created, lab-created proteins are put into processed carbohydrates to give them structure and mouthfeel. And these are the types of things that are causing all kinds of food allergies and all kinds of autoimmune disorders. Because when they put these things in these foods, they get through the intestinal wall without digestion, and your body attacks them as if they're an invader, because they are. They're a non-food. And then what happens is those things will get stuck basically in joints, and therefore you have arthritis and you have the body attacking joints a lot. So processed carbs are probably one of the biggest culprits for corporate change. Companies do the most to these types of foods, and they change the nature of these foods the most. So as long as 90% of your carbohydrate intake comes from whole food carbs, the rest can be processed with minimal risk to your health. This is a big number, folks. 9 out of 10. 90%. Most of you are going to have to significantly change your carbohydrate intake if you want to meet this number. But the nice thing is, the upside of this is, even though it may seem challenging now, the upside is huge. The benefit to your health is awesome. What can be done is amazing. Did everyone read the note between the two last fill in the blanks? I want to touch base on this too. This is just a little snippet of what's going on in food processing. Chlorine dioxide is one of the chemicals used to bleach carbohydrates to turn them white, even if they're turned brown again. By the way, most of the brown carbs you eat that are in a package, they were turned brown again. They were bleached at one point. Kind of crazy. I don't know why you need to do that, but so, because you think brown's better than white, therefore you'll eat it even though it's just as bad. This chemical combines with the residual proteins in these processed products and creates alaxin, which we use in scientific studies to cause diabetes. Anyone have diabetes here? Don't raise your hand, unless you want everyone to know. Anyone listening to this have diabetes? The things they're using to process your food are used in labs to create diabetes. But they're just put in this non-regulated kind of place, and they're called generally accepted as safe. In small amounts, these won't hurt people, right? Take a look at the health of this country right now. It's not showing that it's not affecting people. All right, I want to breeze through this really, really quick as far as touching base on the food label, because your resource guide, your reference manual, reference guide, has, in lesson 1, it's like a book. It goes through all of this stuff in detail, okay? So that is going to be one of your main assignments for this next week, is to make sure to read lesson 1 of your reference guide. It is a wonderful resource tool for you. It goes through all foods, pretty much any food that you want to consume. It explains it very, very well, and it explains the nutrition label as well. And we'll be going through nutrition labels in the upcoming lessons as well. So as you'll see, the various different areas of the nutrition panel, servings per container is where most of you get fooled first, is because they very deceivingly change the servings in a container of food to make you think that there's less food than there actually is, or that there's less calories than there actually is. Secondly is the total fat. This is where a lot of you don't know the details behind what kind of fat are we talking about. Are we talking about a real nature fat, or are we talking about a fat that's been altered, that's been heat processed, that's been denatured? Trans fats. Trans fats can have 0 on a label and still have 0.5 grams in a serving. Just how we wrote the rules, I guess. They can put 0.5 grams in each serving and still put 0 on a label. Why couldn't the rule be written, put 0.5? Because they didn't want you to know about it. Because a bunch of stuff had come out saying trans fats are bad for your cells, they're bad for your heart. And so some lobbyist got somewhere in Washington, had a big enough check, and got the rule written the way they wanted it. You have to know the ingredients. Anything that's hydrogenated in the ingredient panel is a trans fat, even if it says 0 on the label. That's one of the little-known tricks. Processing sodium, another thing. Sodium from the shaker, sodium from a real mineralized source, not bad for you. The sodium they use in processed food, way different story. One of the reasons to go to Whole Foods. Add your own salt. It's not stuck in there and hidden in there. Okay? So when you hear the whole thing about how salt is bad, the first question you should ask is, what salt? Were they testing processed salt? Or were they testing real mineralized salt? Salt that actually comes from the earth, that your body can use. That's actually really important. That your kidneys recycle back into your body. That's salt. Total carbohydrate, which they break down into fiber and sugars. And then total protein.